What is up, everyone? Thanks for joining me for the first TCR Live, the Cardinal Rule, first live stream. All right, so for our first show, I was able to reach out to another person that many of you know, Mike, the Arizona sports fan, and he is going to join us today. So without further ado, Mike, join us, man.
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Good, man. What is up? Hey, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you and what you do for the community. It's really great to connect with other Cardinals creators, and it feels like we're building this community, and one creator at a time. And it's really great to just kind of work together and just collaborate, man. And I'm glad that you were willing to join, and it's really good connecting with you.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me. I know this is definitely amazing to get on another Cardinal YouTuber, man. I've been longing for this for a long time for this to happen. So I appreciate you reaching out to me, and shout out to all the subs that we share. I know I see Red Sea in there. I see Lennon up in there. I got Jean Paul up in there. So we share a lot of the same subs. So I appreciate you, for getting me on here, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Awesome. Well, when I reached out to you, I thought what would be a nice conversation to have would be to just kind of go over some of the things that have happened, the transactions, acquisitions, just a kind of a review of the offseason. I know you've done a lot of conversations about that. I've done some content on that. So it'd be nice to just kind of summarize that. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit, and, you'll be here with me for about 30 minutes. And then folks in the chat, I'm going to kind of have a conversation, have some questions with you all when we get done with our conversation here. So let me start. You're the guest. I'm going to let you kind of get us started. Tell me what you thought about free agency, some of the signings you liked, maybe some that made you scratch your head a little bit, and your general thoughts on those.
Yeah, I honestly thought the free agency haul that we got was, I'm not going to lie to you, I was very surprised in the direction that we did, either through the draft, and of course we'll dive into the draft a little later on, as well as free agency. When I looked at the free agency signings, I really liked what we brought in. It's just, I think it was very obvious in what Steve Keim was trying to do. Now, I don't know if he thinks he's in the hot seat. I don't know if Michael Bidwell said he's in the hot seat, but it's obvious in what he's trying to do. The signings that we got were, most of them 30 plus age individuals, a lot of them being Pro Bowlers at one point, which is actually pretty exciting. But it really seems like we're set up for a 2-year window. One of my favorite acquisitions this last offseason, not talking about the draft, has to be Rodney Hudson. I absolutely loved Rodney Hudson. When I first heard that the Raiders were going to release him, I was like, I'm going live. This needs to happen. Everything is going on. And when I went live, everything kind of turned around and said, no, we're not releasing him. We're actually going to trade him. And actually got me super hyped up because, Ian Rappaport and all these other insiders went about and saying the Cardinals have a strong push to do it. So I loved Rodney Hudson, getting him for a third rounder. I felt it was an absolute steal of a guy to get Rodney Hudson. So that was probably one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, that was a really great move. I think about the upgrade, from who we had at center before it, and it's just a massive upgrade to really have arguably the best center in the league for a third round pick. I joked in one of my recent videos that the Cardinals are determined to build a Pro Bowl roster circa 2015. And they signed a lot of these older players, and that's led a lot of people to talk about, are they, in that short window, pushing all the chips in. And I think some of it also has to do with, what's going on with the salary cap too. A lot of, with everything with the salary cap being down because of the pandemic, there's been a few teams who have been big spenders, but I think when you're looking for a player you can add on a budget, you look for older players, right? Get them on those 1 or 2 year deals rather than going for some of the younger, more expensive guys. So I think Hudson was a great move. When I look at it, I really like most of the moves as well. I think that and Keim has talked about this over and over and over again. And his philosophy is he wants to have a serviceable starter at every position going into the draft, so he doesn't have to draft for need. Now, that doesn't mean he won't upgrade that position in the in the draft. But, he wants to get a cornerback who he feels like can start. And if he drafts one who will be a starter, great. If not, he's got that guy to fall back on.
Right.
And a lot of those acquisitions were like that. When you look at, obviously Rodney Hudson trade was a major upgrade. J.J. Watt was a major upgrade to the defensive interior. But when you look at Malcolm Butler, he was kind of a budget version who actually grades better than Patrick Peterson did last year. Although there's some questions about him getting burnt a lot. If a guy gets 100 tackles, that means there's 100 guys catching the ball in front of him. So there's some questions about that. But I look at a guy like James Conner, and I will say I think that's kind of an underrated signing. He has had some injuries, and some people were down on him. But when you look at what he brings, think about that red zone where, when the Cardinals are at the goal line or within like 5 or 10 yards, teams used to have to worry about Kyler Murray running it, but they didn't have to worry about a power running game, like, taking it down Main Avenue or whatever. But now you've got this big goal line back who teams have to defend against. Plus they have to defend Kyler Murray, plus then the pass, right? So there's three different kinds of things. So there's stuff like that they did that I really liked.
I do have an underrated pick. I don't think for the free agency, I don't think there was one of them that I was like head scratching. I don't get it. That I'll say that more for the draft. But in terms of like my underrated, I have to split it between Prater. Because man, Zane Gonzalez easily, most likely lost us 2 or 3 games last year, like legit. So I like Prater. He's up there in age, but if we're going to try to go for this 2-year window, it fits. And as well as Colt McCoy. A lot of people aren't talking about it, but man, I remember the hype that everybody was talking about. Chris Trevor coming in here, CFL, everybody was really excited. But when Chris Trevor was on the field, man, it was really bad. And a lot of people were saying that if we had any other quarterback, we probably could have beat them. But I don't know. I like Colt McCoy. I think he's serviceable. I liked Brett Hundley, obviously the best, but he's going with all those off the field issues that I don't think he's going to be able to recover from. So Colt McCoy, I'll take that.
No, Colt McCoy, I think a really underrated part of what he brings is a veteran mentor for Kyler Murray, right? Because if Striveler's your backup, they're trying to do the Taysom Hill thing, right? A poor man's Taysom Hill. And I get that. That's, it's a little, as they say, it's a copycat league. And he does emulate Kyler's, or he's mobile. He's not as mobile as Kyler, but they want to have a backup who emulates that. But I think what you really want is a stabilizing force, a guy who's been there, done that, and seen that. Who, when something's going on, on the sideline, can kind of pull Kyler aside as a peer. So, I think that's really an underrated signing. Absolutely. I think a recent one that's also really underrated is Darqueze Dennard as a cornerback. I think he could end up being the number 2 cornerback, especially if Alfred struggles. Alfred hasn't played in 2 years. We'll see what happens with that. And Dennard actually graded pretty well.
Nice.
There was one head scratcher for me a little bit, and that was AJ Green. I hate to say that because I like AJ Green, and I hope he does well. But there's some really troubling stats when you look at him in terms of his yards after catch. He didn't get separation against man. He didn't catch. He had the lowest reception percent in terms of the number of his targets that he caught. Now, some of that was because of bad quarterback play, so there's some things with that. He does help in terms of a big goal line, red zone threat and things like that. But that was a little bit of a head scratcher as far as I'm concerned. But obviously I'm hopeful that he'll do well.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from on that. I think why they did it. I mean, I've been saying Christian Kirk for quite some time now. We don't have to completely dive into Christian Kirk and what you feel about him, but I've given up on Christian Kirk as being a number 2 wide receiver the year prior, and I got my head bit off. Up and down, people are calling me crazy, give him more time. I like him. I honestly really like the guy as a person. I love that he's a hometown kid. But let's put him as a slot and see what he has there, because the second is not happening for Christian Kirk. And I think that's why they went ahead and got AJ Green after all. Now, would I want a younger person? Obviously, but that's kind of who the trend just continued the whole offseason.
No, I think you're right on the mark with with Christian Kirk. He's been miscast as a number 2 outside receiver. He's got speed. He's strong for his, he's got a kind of compact build, but he's really best suited to the slot as kind of like a Golden Tate kind of receiver. Unfortunately, though, we have another really good slot receiver who we just drafted, Rondale Moore, which I think is a great segue to talking about the draft. So what are your thoughts about the players we drafted? Players you like, players you might have thought we reached for? Tell me your thoughts on the draft.
Yeah, that's great. Honestly. To put it in a nutshell, during the draft process, I wasn't a fan of the first 2 picks. I really wasn't. I really did think that we reached for Zaven Collins. Now, I actually made a video like a day before saying that Zaven Collins is going to be the pick. If this happens, if there's no wide receiver, if there's no this, there's no that, there was just a lot of rumors that was going on. Not coming from me, but from the football world, and that's what I put out there. And that's exactly what happened. Now, in that same video, I did say I would be okay with Zaven Collins if, we say he's going to be the starter, because I didn't want another situation where our first round pick is not going to be on the field. Like, I hated the whole Isaiah Simmons not being on the field. I get he got burned in San Francisco, but now I'm happy with it. I'm honestly happy with it now. I seen his character. I love the videos that they're putting out about him. I hope he works out. I don't wish any bad things about any players that are drafted at all. They do good, the Cardinals do good. That's how it works. So now, looking at it here, hindsight, or even if it took a couple weeks after the draft, I see why we got Zaven Collins, because Jordan Hicks most likely will get traded. Maybe he'll be used more as a depth piece, which I honestly hope he does stay as a depth, because we don't know what's going to happen. But during the draft process, that was my head scratching, what are we doing type of thing. The ceiling is falling type of that was me. I was that guy. I'm not going to sit here and lie, but I'm honestly happy about it. I'm honestly happy about it. Rondale Moore was another one too, where I was like, what the heck? Another DK Metcalf. And I don't think it was because the whole Andy Isabella, I wasn't mad that it was another Andy Isabella. I was mad that we did it again with the DK Metcalf to Terrence Marshall, because I want another big wide receiver. Now, it sucks because the whole situation, same kind of height. Now, granted, I know Rondale Moore is bigger, thicker, more explosive. We'll see what happens type of thing. But I kind of felt like, my goodness, Steve Keim, you did it again. But we'll see what happens. I mean, it really just depends on Cliff Kingsbury. My opinion doesn't matter. I just go based off reaction, and if it works out, it works out. That's all I gotta say. My favorite, just a segue to my favorite picks, are probably the later picks. Tay Gowan, Marco Wilson, dynamite pickups to where we got them. So I'll shut up and I'll let you talk now.
No, I agree with you, especially about those cornerbacks later in the draft. It's interesting you mentioned Rondale Moore. I did a video that I titled "Rondale Moore is not Andy Isabella 2.0," and that video actually kind of blew up for me. I stayed up till 7 a.m. on that second day of the draft doing that video, so I knew people would be looking for the next day, and a lot of people were probably in the chat may have been the first thing they saw from me, and it's approaching 16,000 views. Thanks. So, but part of that is, I know that's a sore subject and as a Cardinals fan, right? Taking Andy Isabella with that second round pick that we got for Josh Rosen when DK Metcalf was still on the board, and how Andy Isabella just hasn't been able to see the field very much, and hasn't produced. A lot of people were just saying, why do we take another second round short, fast receiver? But I think, and I talk about this in my video, he comps more to Steve Smith Sr. than he does to Andy Isabella, Rondale Moore. That's a closer comp. He needs to do a lot of things to live up to that. I'm not saying he's that good yet, but in terms of his physical traits, the biggest thing though with Rondale Moore is injuries, right? If he's healthy, he's going to be awesome, right? And that's the big question. But I love what he brings out of the team. And I was with you, or I agree with you in terms of how I felt about Zaven Collins. I also heard some of the stuff from some of the guys that are connected with the Cardinals that he was probably going to be the pick. The way I view that pick, like in the moment, I wanted them to trade back, get a cornerback like a Newsome, or even Asante Samuel Jr., get another second or third round pick. They needed the draft capital. I really like Zaven Collins. So it's that tough thing. Like, some people might say, well, you're being a hater because you wanted them to trade back. And it's just, I thought the value wasn't right. But I like the player, right? And I actually think he might have been the safest pick for them at that point, like high floor, right? He's, he doesn't have an injury history. He's a good character guy. He's smart. He's got good physical tools. He's played well. I think he's going to be a solid middle linebacker in the NFL for 8 to 10 years. But the star potential isn't as prevalent for him or as present for him as it is for some of the other guys they might have taken, right? And when you look at it, middle linebacker is not a position that's highly valued in the NFL. Like, teams don't draft them in the first round a lot, right? Yeah. And they've done it 2 years in a row, essentially. So, with all the other needs on the team, that was a head scratcher for me. Yeah. I like him. I think he's going to be good, and I hope he's a star, and I will root for him every Sunday, right? But from a process roster building perspective, it was head scratching. The other one that was head scratching for me is it's a much smaller scale, but that center Michael Manet that they took out of Penn State, and there's a couple of reasons for me that was head scratcher. One, it's hard to see a path for him to make it onto the roster. They traded away Mason Cole because they were going to have a logjam, an overload of offensive linemen. He'll probably be on the practice squad. But when you're drafting offensive linemen late in the draft, you're looking for guys with high physical traits that you're going to develop. And he's actually the opposite. He's like a 4-year starter. He's old for a rookie. His physical traits are a little bit limited, but he's skilled, right? So he's not a guy who's going to, with being coached up, is going to blossom into something really great. He's, what I'm saying? So that was a head scratcher. But yeah, the cornerbacks, man, Gowan was supposed to go second or third round, right? On a lot of people's boards.
It's crazy, man. Shout out to Gowan. Actually, he ended up commenting on, he seems like a very, very fan favorite already. He commented on my YouTube. He followed me on Instagram, and it's just the small little things, but it really seemed like he did care that, everybody was super open arms for him. So shout out to Tate Gowan for, just jumping on YouTube and being like, hey, thank you. It was cool.
Yeah. No, I saw that, and he followed, he was doing that thing where if you follow me, I'll follow you back. And so he's following me on Twitter.
That's amazing,
and Instagram.
Man.
And, I think I tweeted at him that, he's running a master class on how to win a fan base over,
100%.
Especially as a late round pick who's not going to have the same notoriety. You got to love that. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, so and Marco Wilson's an interesting one because his physical traits are off the chart. It's the decision making, right? Yeah. So, but he's played big boy football. So
yeah, exactly. Well, I kind of look, and I don't like making comps for a lot of people, but it's kind of like the whole Honey Badger thing where when we got him, he's like a troubled guy. But I think Marco Wilson, a lot of people put him on that boat because that whole shoe incident, he ripped the shoe off and threw it. And I just think once we get past that, let's see what this guy can do. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for cornerbacks, especially young cornerbacks, to come up because I don't know what Robert Alford's going to do. I don't know what Malcolm Butler is going to do. So obviously there's a lot of fans that are super high and very optimistic because, why not? We got Cliff Kingsbury coming to his third year. We got Vance Joseph coming to his third year. It makes sense that we should be a better team. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm really worried about this season. I'm super scared. We can talk about that a little later, maybe on a different stream, but yeah, dude, I'm a little worried. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, what is it you're most worried about?
I'm worried that we got the pieces, but we don't have the depth. So any person that gets hurt, whether you say it's JJ Watt, whether you say it's AJ Green, whether you say it's any person that we got that's over 30, which has a high probability of getting hurt, I don't feel like we have the serviceable people to come in to be like, hey, we got this. Now, if it happens, it happens. Great. I'm all up and board with it, but we just never been that team. We've always rode that, next man mentality, especially with, or next man up with, Bruce Arians, but I don't know, man. It's going to either work very well or I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's I'm probably more unsure about what this season's going to look like than any season I remember in recent history.
Thank
You
you.
know,
Me
I could see it going really, really well with the players they've added, and could see it falling apart of just a few injuries. So yeah, so it's exciting, but it's nerve wracking, right?
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah, yeah. No, is there another player that you think, in terms of like someone who's already in the roster, that you think is going to kind of step up? Someone you think might have a breakout year, or someone that is maybe an under the radar player that Cardinals fans should be watching this season?
I think the scapegoat is saying Isaiah Simmons. I hope he takes another year, but I want to say Jalen Thompson. I mean, we have Jalen Thompson there, and we've seen what he can do. He just needs to stay healthy. I love him back there next with Buda Baker. I think it's an awesome duo. It's just when we didn't have a safety, it was obvious because we went through safety after safety, and I believe it was last year. Chris Banjo did pretty decent. He got
played
hurt.
well.
Yeah, and
Washington.
then we got Deontay Thompson.
He got Charles hurt. Washington.
Charles Washington. Yeah, it was just I want everybody to look out for Jalen Thompson. I think it's more of an obvious name more than anything, but I'm gonna have to go with him. As long as he can stay healthy, I think he's definitely a baller, man.
Someone saying Byron Murphy. I think someone thinks Byron Murphy is going to have a breakout year.
Right. I hope so.
Yeah. And then, I mean, he played pretty well last year in the slot. His PFF grading was in the mid-60s, which is reasonable. So yeah, I think he could have another step forward. And cornerbacks take time to develop. And then here in Lecky Fotu, that's interesting because with that interior, with your defensive line, a lot of times teams like to rotate guys in, right? So I could see him getting some time, and most teams, their base defense is actually more of a nickel, so that nose tackle is on the field very often. But when they do bring that nose tackle, and I could see Fotu being that guy.
Me too.
So yeah, there's definitely a couple guys like that.
I do like Licky Fotu. I mean, there's also Rashard Lawrence, but I do think Licky Fotu will have an advantage over him in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think Fotu has the bigger upside in terms of physical traits. The guy is just a monster, really big, strong. Lawrence, they drafted him because of his leadership. I mean, he was, a team captain on LSU, and I remember when they drafted, they gushed about how he was the guy. Everyone to a man would say that's the leader of this team. And you want those guys in your locker room, but if you're looking for a guy who's going to really blow up, And then, Josh Jones, that's interesting because, they drafted him as a tackle, and he was, he was a really great pick for them. Fell to the third round, and, a lot of people had him graded as a first-round tackle.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah, he didn't do much last year, but tackles always take a couple years. But it's interesting to see they might, have him, compete for that right guard position. I think he profiles with his pass blocking as more as a left tackle, but with DJ in that spot, where's the path to starting? So maybe being a guard might be the role. Got a lot of love for Dennis Gardeck, man. He's captain small sample size, man. 7 sacks and 90. I don't think that's replicable, but here's hoping, right?
Right, exactly. So, fingers crossed is all we can really say at that point.
So what do you think they're going to do with the tight end position? Because that seems like it's the only position left where it doesn't feel like they've adequately addressed it.
Yeah. I think they were working out. I believe was it Jake Butt? I believe his name was
Jake Butt.
Yeah, he had some really high praise in college. I didn't really know too much about him, but I know when he was drafted, everybody was super high on him, but just never really had an opportunity. I do think that we need to address it. I do. I was on the Zach Ertz trade. If we can get an option to maybe get him as a 4th or 5th rounder, the only issue is that Zach is going to want to get paid. To wherever team wants to go, he wants to get paid, and that just might not be the Cardinals. So that might be my only downfall. But I'm all in on Zach Ertz if we can get him. If we can somehow talk to him and be like, "Look, bro, we'll get you in. We got a team ready to win now. If we can get you on this year." But I honestly doubt it. I think he's looking for more security more than anything, and rightfully so. He's a player that wants to get paid, and I don't blame him for it.
I think I could also see him wanting to go to a team that's going to feature the tight end more. Cardinals just don't.
100%.
They do more 3 and 4 wide receiver sets than any else in football. And even, you look at people talk about, we're missing Dan Arnold, but when you look at Dan Arnold lined up as an inline tight end, only like 40% of his snaps, he was a tight end. Another 60%, he was like a slot receiver.
Yeah.
So they don't use a tight end a lot. And Max Williams is a really good blocking tight end. So I'm with you. I think, Jake, but he was a 5th round pick of the Broncos, had some injuries. I think that's the kind of guy they're going to go after, a depth guy. And I think they're just going to go with that because, again, they don't feature the tight end very much.
True. That's very true. Exactly. And I know a lot of people are like, well, we can, make those adjustments. I don't trust Cliff Kingsbury to do it. Let's just keep with what we got right now and go through with it, man. Come on. Let's get the playoffs going.
I think the thing that they need to do on their offense is improve the running game. I think Connor's going to help with that power running game. And what they need to do is they need to fix the intermediate passing game because Kyler Murray was really good in the short passes and long passes, but he was not in the intermediate. And actually, that's where I think A.J. Green's going to help out a lot. Sure. If they can fix that and be more consistent, I think that's going to go a long way because their offense was good enough to compete. That so if they just get a little bit of improvement and do well in defense and play consistent, they could do pretty well. Is there anything else? I know you've got limited time. So was there anything else you wanted to talk about or anything you wanted to tell everyone? I think most people in here probably know about your channel, but let them know where they can find you and anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, I'll definitely, if that's cool with you, I'll just do a real quick shout out. I do have another question for you before I leave. If you don't know who I am, my name is Mike. I run a YouTube channel named The AZ Sports Fan. We talk everything Cardinals. If you don't know me by now you do. So definitely go and check me out if you're interested. If not, no worries. Cardinal Rule is definitely amazing. He'll treat you well. My last question for you, man, is, and I know it's kind of tough to go against it, like any buddy in the Cardinals, but how do you really feel about Cliff Kingsbury? Like, how do you really feel about him?
All right, so I'm not as down on him as other people are, and I actually think he's going to have a longer leash than most people do. And I'll tell you why. When they hired him, they took some heat for hiring a guy who had a losing record in college, and all that. And I listened to an interview with Michael Bidwell and his rationale behind the hiring. And what he talked about was the cycle you usually see is a team has this really great offensive coordinator, a young guy, right, who's an offensive coordinator, and someone else hires that guy away from them, right? And then they have to replace them. And what Michael Bidwell said, his rationale was, hey, you know what? We see this guy who's one of those young kind of, offensive minds who still needs some work to be a really good head coach. But rather than hire him as an offensive coordinator and let someone hire him away from us 2 years from now when he's ready, let's hire him as a head coach, surround him with veteran coaches like Vance Johnson, former head coach. Let him take his lumps. I'm paraphrasing. Let him take his lumps. And when he's gotten to the point where he's that guy where normally someone would have hired him away from us if he's our offensive coordinator, he's our head coach, right? So I really think that being patient with Cliff is actually part of the plan. And I don't think he's on the hot seat the same way a lot of people do. If they win 4 games, I think he'll be out. But if they're still a borderline playoff team, I don't necessarily think they're going to bail on him. I think they're looking at it as a long game that we knew this was what we were going to be, getting when we signed on with this guy. He needed time to develop, to take his lumps, and we're going to let him do it. So I think he's going to be a good coach. I get why people are frustrated. The team collapsed down the stretch. He didn't adapt to the NFL the way some people thought he should. But he has adapted some, and I think he'll continue to do that. So maybe I'm just an eternal optimist, right? But maybe it's just that I'm just more prone to think moderation and patience. But yeah, I think that was I think they knew that was what they were going into with him, and I think they're going to be patient with him.
Yeah, I could definitely see where you're coming from with that. It's just, I'm glad that we have this opportunity where, people can go ahead and, because there's a lot of people that have your approach and there's nothing wrong with it. My approach is, my goodness, what is going on? one thing that I said, and I can literally say right now with the coaches that we have in the NFC West, that Cliff Kingsbury is the worst head coach in the NFC West.
Okay.
So, and I know that that's the thing though. Like, I don't know if he can develop to become that person. Hopefully we all got our fingers crossed that this can happen. It's just, I'm not high on him. If you haven't watched my chat, I'm just not. I feel like we're going to be disappointed. And I think one of the things is why we're an organization the way that we are is because patience is cool. I'm down with it. I know we need consistency down the stretch, but you need to have the right guy. And Matt LaFleur was the guy. Stefanski from the Browns was the guy. Close to, you know what I mean? Because honestly, if you gave Steve Wilkes the opportunity, he might have given you 2 extra games in next year. And if you gave him another opportunity, he might give you another 1 or 2 years or the next 2 games and the year after that. It's a process. What I'm looking for is a guy that's the leader of men. And I just don't see it in him. Everybody told me, calm down. It's going to be fine. Let's get an offensive coordinator. I'm like, cool. All right, let's wait. Let's get an offensive coordinator. Yeah. We didn't get an offensive coordinator. We're running back with the same guy out there that did screens all the time. And that's where my frustration comes from. But, hey, opinions are opinions. I hope you're right. I really do, man. And I'll come back on your channel and be like, I was dumb.
Well, let me tell you, if I'm wrong, I'm happy to admit that too. You know, who knows, right? Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I will say though, you know, I've heard that, you know, the worst coach in the division, but we also are a division with arguably 3 of the best coaches in football. So that's my mindset too. And I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. But if we don't have a coach that's going to compete, how are we ever going to get anywhere? That's where my mindset. But I do see where you're coming from. Where let him develop. He eventually will get there. But we'll see. Yeah, but I think what we agree on for sure is that this is a really important season for the Cardinals and for
100%.
This is a really pivotal. I mean, it's funny because if you look at it in a vacuum and you said, or step outside of it and say, okay, if you told me, you know, when the Cardinals were, you know, rolling out Josh Rosen and it was just, you know, one of the worst seasons I've ever experienced as a Cardinals fan.
Yeah, it was bad.
If you told me, okay, they're going to hire a coach, he's going to win 5 games and then 8 games, right? I'd say sign me up, right? That's the trajectory you want, right? Now, because the way it went down, right, being in a position for the playoffs and then, you know, losing to San Francisco, you know, with CJ Beathard starting quarterback. Right, when we should have won and losing to the Rams and who I forget the name of the backup
John
they
Wolford.
had. Yeah, there you go. If you know the way it went down was traumatizing, right, as a fan. So I get that, but that's a great question, and man. Anything else you want to say? Again, I want to respect.
No, that's it, man. I would love to come back, and I would hopefully love to get you on here because I honestly I think this is the beautifulest world here where you can actually be super calm. And obviously me, you know, I'm already getting worked up here and it's just me as a passionate fan that I want to like dump this case over. But you know, we have the Suns right now. So the Phoenix Suns are doing super good. So I'm excited about that.
You and me both, man. You and me both. This Suns team is built for a championship run in terms of the way the roster's built. They've got the veterans you want, man.
100% agree. 100% agree, my guy. Cool, man. Well, thanks for letting me be on here, man.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate you.
Awesome. Well, let me know. I'll be happy to join you on your show anytime. We'll have you back on here. And again, thank you for everything. All right, everyone. Mike's going to peace out, and we'll see him next time.
Peace out, y'all. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, man. All right. Hey, everyone. All right. So now what I want to do is actually I want to get to the chat, and I apologize that I haven't been able to keep up with everything, but I want to get your take on what you've seen. So I've actually got some questions. First question, and so I want to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite signing or trade this offseason for the Cardinals? So so obviously Mike and I talked about the players, the signings we liked, the players that the acquisitions that we felt we were high on. Who are you high on? What players did you like that the Cardinals signed, traded for, and why do you like those acquisitions? So we'll just kind of keep an eye on chat. All right, so I'm seeing Hudson. Okay, we got Jordan Hudson easily. Yeah, I think fixing that offensive line, that center position, the offensive line actually played reasonably well. If you look at their grades in PFF, they were actually pretty good. But adding arguably the best center is going to really help a lot. And I think what's also really important about that, when you watch the Cardinals games, you saw that Kyler got a lot of pressure up the middle. They really, and then he would, kind of scramble around. And Hudson's going to minimize that. So I think that's really going to help. It's going to help in the running game. Butler, I think, Cattle Dogs mentioning Butler. Yeah, I think Butler's really interesting because I think he is a really good pickup for them. I was really glad when they signed him. He graded better than Patrick Peterson in 2020 per PFF. But there's also a few things that are kind of concerning. He did, he had 100 tackles, but if there's 100 tackles, that means there's 100 receptions, going on in front of you. And he did get burned a bit, but overall he did grade pretty well. So I think that was, I think when you look at the way Peterson played last year, you could argue that Butler's actually at this point an upgrade, although I think Peterson's going to have a rebound year in Minnesota with Mike Zimmer. And, J.J. Watt, John Paul Edward DeDios mentions J.J. Watt. Yeah, I mean, he's arguably one of the best players to ever play his position. The leadership he brings. And I think something we aren't really talking about a lot with J.J. Watt is sort of the sense of legitimacy. When a player of his caliber who's being courted by the Packers and the Steelers and other teams says, I want to go to the Arizona Cardinals, I think that says something. Now, some people have kind of played that off as, it was all about the money, they're collecting old folks. It's just like, when they've signed, guys like, Emmitt Smith in the past. But I think this is legit. And I think the fact, that DeAndre Hopkins played with him with the Texans and is here. The fact that he came here, he's not coming here without a really good endorsement, from DeAndre Hopkins, which says a lot about, the organization. If you've been a Cardinals fan a long time, like I have, you probably remember there was a long period of time where people felt like this organization was not run well. People were very critical of Bill Bidwell. Now, some of that had to do with them not having a stadium and the finances. When you have a stadium, you get revenue, you can do some things. But I really feel like under Michael Bidwell, in recent years, this team is actually very stable and well run. Now, we can argue some of the, that maybe, Kaiman's had some questionable draft picks and some of things haven't gone well. But in terms of, a team that doesn't have dysfunction, in the front office, a stable ownership group, I think that's a really important thing that we've seen with the Cardinals. And I think Watt choosing to come here really, kind of serves to legitimate that. Again, we see another person, David Renteria saying Hudson. Yeah, I agree. That's a really great pick. Arizona Animal, my man, he was disappointed that we didn't take Najee Harris. So, but the kicker, I think that's, kickers are people too, right? But, kickers, they're that position that they're an afterthought, but when we lose a game because of a bad kick, then they're front and center, and having a very reliable kicker is really important. Mason Cole was not good. Upgrading from Mason Cole is really important. See here, signing J.J. Watt and trade Rodney Hudson, draft Rondé Moore. Okay, yeah, I like all three of those. Okay, J.J. Watts. See, I think. I think Darqueze Dennard is going to be really good from. In fact, I'll tell you, that's a really great segment. I'm gonna. There's a segment that I'm going to do. I think I'm going to do each week, and I'm calling it Fun Facts. So I think this Darqueze Dennard is a really great segue for the fun fact for this episode. So bear with me. Warning: old man navigating technology. All right, here we go. Fun fact. Former Cardinals cornerback Dre Kirkpatrick had more penalties in 2020 with 9 than recently signed cornerback Darqueze Dennard has had his entire career with 7. So Kirkpatrick's had 54 penalties. When they signed Dennard, I looked at some of his stats and just to kind of get a sense for what they were getting from him. And if you watch the Cardinals games last year, you remember Kirkpatrick just felt like a flag drawing machine. And when I looked at this really stood out to me that Denard has had 7 penalties in his entire career. He did have 3 last seasons, so that was a bad year for him. But I thought that was a really interesting kind of fun fact there. So with some of the other players that people liked, Yep, Deep Butler's a dog. Okay. Malcolm Butler could be a great leader for this team. Yeah. Patrick Peterson's getting burned by the Vikings practice as we speak. But I'll tell you, I saw a really funny thing on, I don't know if it was on Twitter, but somewhere I saw something that said that Kirk Cousins is already getting used to throwing passes to Patrick Peterson. So it was kind of a knock on Cousins. But, yeah. Let's see. So some of the other players that y'all liked. Man, yeah, so, man, with Larry Fitzgerald, I love Larry Fitzgerald, obviously. I mean, who doesn't, right? Is he going to be back? And if he is, man, there's the receiver room's already full, so someone's gone. I know a lot of people feel like, and it is about time to move on from him. If Larry Fitzgerald comes back, he and AJ Green are kind of competing for that big receiver role. So I love Larry. I'd love to see him get his ring. But he hasn't been the same player, so I just don't know. Denard got another rule vote for Denard being we signed it. We have a new wide receiver coach. We that was one. They fired the David Ray. I think it was Rye. I think was his name. I forget his first name, but Rye was his last name. They fired him. So okay, next question. So what was the biggest head scratcher in terms of signing or trades? What acquisition had you scratching your head from the Cardinals this offseason? Or did any of them? Or did you like everything that they did in terms of signing? I mentioned for me, it was AJ Green. I like AJ Green. I think he's a great player. I hope he does well. I don't think he'll be as bad as he was last year in some of those measurements or metrics like yards after catch. But man, he was dead last in yards after catch average, separation. That is a little concerning. Now, again, there's some really bad quarterback play. I talked about that in my last video. Okay, so Arizona Animal was really like another wide receiver drafting. I mean, I like Rondale Moore, and I think he's an exciting player. But I get why that has you scratching your head. Having another receiver when there's so many that still need to kind of figure it out. So I hear, okay, Brian Winters. Now, yeah, that's an interesting one. He was released by the Jets. I don't mind that signing because I think he's a guy who's going to get in there and compete for that right guard position. And he may, if he wins it, great. If he doesn't, he's going to be depth. But so I don't know. And maybe what you're wishing is that they went with someone who is a little bit more of an upgrade rather than a journeyman. So Jean Paul, I'm not sure what it is that is you just don't like him. You wish they had gone a little bit higher end player. He's been a starter in the past, and so he's going to kind of be in the mix for that role. But okay, I could see that. Then we signed a punter. I think that's just a guy for the for the preseason, probably just for practices, right? So you like the signing? I hear like the signings. Should have still drafted a cornerback, and I'm assuming what you mean is that they should have drafted one earlier because they drafted 2 of them. So, Robert, what I'm assuming what you mean by that is you think they should have gone with one in the first or second round, which is what I wanted them to do as well. So let me just ask you what you all think is and we'll let this be for signings or draft picks. But what do you think was your favorite under the radar acquisition, right? Okay, so let me just John, thank you for responding. My follow-up question. Okay, so what I'm hearing from you here is it's not as much about the player, but you felt like they didn't need it. They had a couple guys who you thought were going to kind of compete between Murray and Josh Jones. They didn't need to bring another guy in the mix. Yeah, okay, I could see that. I think, and Justin Murray started for them at tackle, a couple of years ago and has played some guard. So he's played well, right? And then Josh Jones. So I see what you're saying. So that you thought it was maybe unnecessary to add another guard to the mix, and then they've got some other veterans like Max Garcia in there. Okay, yeah, thank you. So what was your favorite kind of under the radar player that they signed or drafted or traded for? Someone who maybe people aren't talking about a lot, but you think could be an important acquisition for them. And so, I think for me, one of the guys I've mentioned, Starquez Denard, I think is really good under the radar guy. I talked a little bit. I see Tapatio man says James Conner. Yeah, I really like that signing in terms of what he brings to them as that power back. All right, David Renteria is saying you think the Cardinals going to have a top 5 O line. So I'm assuming that is that a statement or a question? I think you might be you're asking me if I think they do. I don't think they'll have a top 5. I do think I really like. I mean, DJ Humphries, I think, was the number 4 rated corner or tackle. Let's see. I'll just look at that real quick. Yeah, DJ Humphrey was the 4th highest graded tackle on PFF, and Kelvin Beachum graded reasonably well. Their offensive line is better than people think. And then Hudson, when you throw Hudson in the mix, that can really go a long way. So it wouldn't shock me if they were top 5. I'm maybe going to be a little bit more tempered in that, and I'm going to say top 10 and approaching top 5. But man, it's entirely possible. And for all the things we want to say about Kingsbury, there's some things he does that help that offensive line out by like spreading things out. So yeah, that's a possibility. David Renteria, they signed me. Yeah, that was a great sign. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Any other under the radar picks that you really like before we kind of wrap this up, or anything else y'all want to say? I definitely appreciate y'all being here. I appreciate the comments, the support. AJ Green, you really like that AJ Green signing, man. I'm a little torn on it. I see what he could do in this offense. It was such a rough year last year, but if you watch my video, I talked about all the things I think he could do in terms of the intermediate routes and moving the chains. So I could see that him being a really quietly impactful, if not more than quietly. And Arizona Animal, Victor Dimukic pick. Yeah, James Harrison Jr., man. Again, if you saw my video on Dimukic, I like the strategy of taking pass rushers in the middle rounds, like the Baltimore Ravens do. If you watch the Ravens, what they do, it seems like every year somewhere between round 3 and 6, sometimes earlier and later, but in those middle rounds, they pick these pass rushers who need to develop. They might have something about them that they're something they excel at, something else that they need to work on to be successful the next year. And they just keep drafting those guys. They give them a couple years to develop. They put them in a system where they do well. And by the 3rd year, sometimes even their 2nd year, but 2nd or 3rd year, they're solid pass rushers. And then, the Ravens have them for 1 or 2 years, and then they become free agents, and the Ravens let them walk, right? Zaire Smith, I think, who signed with Green Bay a few years ago, is an example of that. They let those guys walk, and then they get a compensatory pick, right? Because someone else signed them, and that compensatory pick might be a 3rd, 4th, 5th rounder, depending. And then they use those compensatory picks to kind of keep drafting those guys. And I like that process from a roster building perspective. So from a process perspective, I really like the Demukaji pick. When I look at the player, there's some things I like about him as well. He does have some limitations. But yeah, I think that's a really good under the radar pick. So yeah, I think that's a really good one. Kingsbury being able to use a tight end and air raid shows his potential, but needs to develop strategy and situation. Yeah, we talked about Kingsbury. There's some things he needs to work on. But man, again, maybe I'm just a naive optimist, but I think he's going to be okay. But he does need to adapt. Absolutely. And then, okay. That's Sean Williams, I think, the safety. He's that, Jean Paul, that's a really good underrated signing. He has been a long-time starter for the Bengals and actually rates pretty well. Sean Williams, like when you look at his PFF grades, they've been in the 70s and 60s, which isn't, if you look at PFF grades, someone in the 60s is a reasonable starter, not a Pro Bowler, but for a guy that people aren't talking about, I think that's a good signing. And now there's a lot of safeties on this roster between the two Thompsons, obviously Buda Baker, Sean Williams, Banjo, Washington, Wiggins, the guy they drafted, James Wiggins, and Seth's mentioning him, and Michael Manet. We talked about Manet earlier, someone who to me was a little bit of a head scratcher because he doesn't have those high end physical traits. But he's a 4-year starter. Wiggins, I don't know if he's going to be a guy who plays for them as a safety much, but he is a guy they're talking about as a special teams ace. And Trent Sherfield, who was one of their better special teams players, signed with the 49ers. They still have, I think it's Ezekiel Turner, I believe I got that name right. And what you've got is now you've got a guy, Wiggins, who could be a really good player on special teams. So yeah, I think that's when you're drafting. Yeah, John Paul, thank you. He's going to, probably going to be a gunner. When you're drafting a guy that late, if you get a guy, you're looking at guys who may or may not make the roster, might be practice squad guys. So if you can get a guy who's going to be a gunner and a guy who can do that for you, that's a good pick that late. Even if he doesn't end up seeing the field other than special teams, if you get a guy 6th or 7th round and he is your gunner, that's a good pick. Got a question, Seth. Hey, just a quick question for you. So, the Cardinals will show off for their postseason. All right, sorry. Let me read this again. Make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. Hey, just a quick question for you. So, here's the Cardinals. So, I don't know if I apologize. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Maybe the Arizona Cardinals will show off. Are they going to show off postseason for the whole entire? So, are you asking? Are they going to be in the postseason? Seth, I apologize if you want to ask that question or help me understand what you're asking. I want to answer your question. I'm just not sure I'm asking. Do I think they're going to make the postseason? I think there's a chance. It's a tough division. Yeah. So yeah. So do I think they're gonna, or do I think the whole entire NFC West is gonna make the postseason? Are you asking that because of the added wild cards? And that's possible. People talked about that last season, but I don't think so. I just if you're betting the way things are going to play out, I think 2 teams for NFC West will make the playoffs and maybe a third team. Listen, anything can happen, right? But if I were a betting man, I would not bet on the entire division making the playoffs. All right. Listen, again, I thank everyone for being here. If there's any other, I don't see any other questions coming through, so I'm going to go. We're going to end the show, but I appreciate everyone being here. I'm going to try to do these lives, from time to time. I will see. I'm not sure exactly how often I'll do them. I'm going to continue to do the videos you're used to seeing from me. Those shorter, those take a bit of time to do, and as I've gotten more into the film side of things. And that the videos are taking longer and longer to do as I learn how to do them more and how to hopefully better in the video. Tapatio, I see you got a question. You go ahead and get that question in there, and I'll try to answer that. So, I might end up doing those edited videos every other week and maybe a live in between. We'll see how the routine goes, but I will continue to do those. And just as I get more in depth in those, I need a little more time to prep them. But I appreciate everyone here, and I'm sure you've seen, we're getting really close to 1,000 subscribers. So I appreciate all you who've joined, and help me get the word out about the channel. So we can get to that 1,000 subscribers, hopefully before preseason starts. Tapatio, man, do you think the Cardinals, where do I think the Cardinals stand in the NFC West in terms of who is a better team overall? Man, as much as I love the Cardinals, as a Cardinals fan, so I think the Rams right now, if I had to be completely objective, I had to kind of pick who I think has the best chance to be the number one team in the division right now, it's the Rams. With the roster they've got, there are some issues, but overall they've got good players at key positions. I actually think Seattle and Arizona are neck and neck for that next position. It's hard to count out Russell Wilson. They've got some really good receivers in Seattle. They've got good coach. Their defense is a bit suspect. At least they were last year. So if they don't make some major improvements, so that's going to hold them back. So I think they and the Cardinals number 2. And I know a lot of people think San Francisco is going to be competing for that top team. I'm more skeptical of the 49ers than a lot of people are. Everyone, Shanahan's the darling of the NFL. Everyone talks about him as this great coach. And I do think he's a good coach, but that, people have been talking about that this offseason. He hasn't had winning records very often, right? For a guy who doesn't have many winning records, I know he had the Super Bowl run, but people really build him up for a guy who's really for a coach who hasn't had the kind of success you might think. And with the uncertainty at quarterback, and is Jimmy G going to start? Is Trey Lance going to start? Is Jimmy G going to be injured? They've got some talent on that roster, no doubt. But I actually think they could potentially be that fourth team. Any free agents we should get and improve with, could still get. I think. There are guys out there we could sign in that would improve a roster, like Richard Sherman. Last I heard, he still hasn't signed in. Correct me if I'm wrong. Certainly, he could, improve our cornerback situation. But with the cap money, the cap space they have, the way they've approached free agency, I don't think they're signing another cornerback. I think Darqueze Dennard was that last cornerback they're signing. I think they're done with the cornerback room. I think the only position they're not done with is tight end. I think they're going to. I do think they're going to sign a tight end. We talked about Jake Butt earlier. I think that's the kind of guy they're going to go after. I know a lot of people really hope they get Zach Ertz. Listen, if it happens, and I'm wrong, I'm more than happy to admit I was wrong. I don't think they're going after Ertz. I think they're going after a veteran depth guy. Because they don't feature the tight end. And yeah, Robert, I agree with you. We really need a tight end, but what I think we need is someone for depth, because what we have is Max Williams, Darrell Daniels. Both those guys were on the roster last year, but after that, it's a lot of practice squad kind of guys. They have a couple undrafted free agents like Kerry Angeline, who's interesting, a good receiver. But I would really like to see them get a veteran depth guy, right? Someone who might be the number 2 tight end, right? So I think that's what we need. I think Trey Lance could be a great guy. I think Trey Lance is going to be. Shanahan's good with quarterbacks. You look at anyone who started for them, he's managed to do well with them. So I think Trey Lance is going to be good. I think he landed in a spot that is going to help him be really good. I think he needs a year or two, right? Yeah, and then Matthew Stafford needs a lot of work. Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, they're fine. Yeah. I mean, people really like Matthew Stafford. And a lot of people really think that he's going to thrive with McVay, and I do think he's a good quarterback. So I think they'll do well. I do think he's an upgrade from Goff. What about our offensive tackles? I like our offensive tackles. Like I mentioned, DJ Humphries was the fourth rated tackle for PFF. He's played really well last season. He's gotten better as he's gone, throughout his career. He seems to be a solid tackle. Josh Jones as a guy that they're developing who could be kind of a swing tackle if he doesn't end up being their guard. And Kelvin Beachum was actually a pretty good tackle. He graded pretty well. He's better at pass blocking than run blocking, but I think as a right tackle, he's pretty good. I like our tackles. I don't think they're doing anything else with offensive line. Yeah, Ertz is better than any of our tight ends now. I agree. I agree in terms of at least as a receiver. I think Max Williams is a really good blocking tight end. I just think this team does not use the tight end a lot. Even when they do, they put them as slot receivers a lot. They run more 4 wide receiver sets than anyone else in the NFL. I don't think they're going to address it with a guy like Ertz as much as listen. If they sign him, I'll be happy. I will love having that upgrade. I just don't think that's where they're going to allocate their salary cap that they have. But who knows, right? Yeah, Justin Fields, man. Look at the Bears' quarterback history. Like, who's the best quarterback the Bears have ever had, right? It's not a pretty picture, right? Is Jim McMahon their best quarterback ever? I mean, that's a franchise that has not had good quarterbacks. And for Justin Fields to fall into their lap, for them to manage to get out of this draft with Justin Fields when they weren't picking early, in the first round, that's a huge win for them. Now, obviously, we'll see how he ends up as a player. Players, quarterbacks are always kind of a coin flip whether they make it or not. But that was a coup for them to land him. I mean, that's just absolutely a great pick for the Bears, and I think he'll be good. I think he's in a good situation. Though I will say, Ohio State quarterbacks don't have a good track record if you look at them. But I think that could be really good for them. Got a few. I think we make a playoff run right without a tight end. Yeah, I just don't think a tight end is as necessary. I think, Jean-Paul Edward Didios says his safety net running back in the flat, not tight end like other teams. Yeah, it's just not as important on this team, at least as a receiver. And I know people talk about, we lost Dan Arnold, but Dan Arnold, I think 45% of his snaps, if I'm remembering correctly, were in the slot and then some on the outside. I think a lot of those receptions that Dan Arnold got are going to go to AJ Green as a big receiver. Jim saying Robert saying Jim McMahon was their best quarterback. Rest of our roster salved, so you don't think we need the tight end. And I agree with you, Jean-Paul, that Max is actually a really good tight end. He's not a major receiving tight end. He's capable as a receiver, but he is really good as a blocker. And I think he was a second round pick, I think, for the Ravens, a first or second round pick. He was a pretty high pick for a tight end. When they signed him, I loved it. He was a guy who was buried on the depth chart in Baltimore, so didn't really do much. But when they signed him a couple of years ago, I really liked that. I thought it was a good signing. And I think he's turned out to be a really good player for them. So absolutely. Gone a little bit longer than I anticipated here, but some really great comments and questions. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, though. I think we've gone over an hour. But again, I really appreciate you all being here for my first live. The comments, the questions, really appreciate that. I appreciate the support for the channel. I appreciate that you guys watch my videos, that you comment on those videos. I see a lot of you who are in the chat today. I see you, and I repeat, comment on my videos, over and over again. And I see those names and I recognize them. And every time you comment, I want you to know I really appreciate it. I sincerely appreciate that anyone takes time out of their day to watch something I do. So thank you all. And I look forward to seeing you all next time we do the stream. And of course, go Cardinals. Peace.